Thank you, everyone, very much for being here today. I'm really excited about the second part of our program, and I know you are all too, so I won't talk too long. But we want to give a proper introduction to our special guests today. I'm Rachel Hogan-Carr. I'm Executive Director here at Nurture Nature Center. And for those of you who have not been here before, and there are some, we use science, art, and dialogue to help the community learn about these local and global environmental issues that you saw. We're really excited when we can have a special guest come into town and bring us a new perspective, and that is A.J. Jacobs. And if you aren't already very familiar, his website has a funny line that I loved, that is, A.J. Jacobs is an author, journalist, lecturer, and human guinea pig. He's written 4 New York Times bestsellers that combine memoir, science, humor, and a dash of self-help. He's also editor-at-large at Esquire magazine, a commentator on NPR, a columnist for Mental Floss magazine. And his first book was called The Know-It-All, One Man's Humble Quest to Become the Smartest Person in the World. And that was on the New York Times bestseller list for quite some time. And he spent 18 months reading the entire Encyclopedia Britannica and to learn everything in the world. So we can all feel a little slow around AJ right now. But we had the joy of bringing him here a few years ago also when he talked about this other guinea pig book, Drop Dead Healthy. In this one, it says here, one man's humble quest for bodily perfection, the tale of his quest to be as healthy as humanly possible. And that one was a great one. And I remembered the takeaway very well, that one of the important things is we should just not sit so much. So you saw our office. Our office now has standing desks, and we took that message to heart, so thank you. Yeah. And of course, today we're here to talk about his recent, but not most recent book, It's All Relative, Adventures Up and Down the World's Family Tree, that's going to connect, as you'll see, to what we just saw over on the Science on a Sphere. And because we're lucky, we're going to get a dash of the brand new book that is like a week or 2 weeks old. Is this right? Thanks, 1,000, A Gratitude Journey, in which, well, I'll let him, I won't do the spoiler alert. However, you're going to want to read these, and they're for sale out in the hallway by our wonderful local independent bookseller, Book and Puppet Company, probably one of the coolest new things to happen in Easton, just half a block away. So make sure to buy some copies of the books. They're great Christmas gifts or holiday gifts. Get them signed by AJ, and when you're done here, you can walk down the street and see the rest that they have to offer, which is really dynamic, kind of neat place there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to AJ, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you all for coming. And I loved Kate's presentation. It's a tough act to follow. I don't have a globe, but I have some pictures. And I'm really excited to speak about the theme today, connections, because it is a theme that runs through all of my books, and we need connections. My grandmother's favorite quote was by the poet John Donne, that no man is an island. I think we would revise that today for these more progressive times, that no woman is an island either. No non-binary person is an island. No, but it's more than that, as my aunt pointed out. It's no microbe is an island. No animal is an island. We are all connected, which is what we learned from Kate. I'm also excited because I have deep family connections to the Nurture Nature Center. My grandfather was an inspiring man who passed away a few years ago, but he was very interested in helping the world, and he helped found the Nurture Nature Center. And my Aunt Jane, who is with us today, thank you, Jane, continues his legacy and works hard to nurture nature and put on this great programming. So very excited to be here. I'm going to do a quick tour of 4 of my books, give you a little Whitman sampler, and show how connection plays a part in each of them, because I think it is the glue that binds all of my books together. So the first book I thought I would talk briefly about is called The Year of Living Biblically. And this book came about because I grew up with no religion at all. As I say in the book, I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. So not very. No offense to the Olive Garden. But I had a son, and I was also just fascinated with the continuing power of religion. So I thought, I want to learn about this. And the way I like to learn and write my books is I immerse myself totally in my topic, just dive in, and as Rachel said, become a human guinea pig. So I thought, you know what, to learn about the Bible, maybe I should live by all the rules of the Bible for a year and see what I learn and see how they affect me, what makes my life better, what makes my life worse, what makes my life crazier. So I got myself a stack of Bibles and a board of spiritual advisors. So I had rabbis and ministers and scholars and atheists, and I made a list of all the rules in the Bible. And as you might know, this is quite a long list, over 700 rules. And I wanted to follow them all without picking and choosing. So I wanted to follow the famous ones, the Ten Commandments, of course, love your neighbor. But the Bible also has dozens of rules that are not, that don't get quite as much publicity. So I wanted to follow those as well. The Bible says that you cannot shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were, so I just let the whole thing grow. And as you can see, by the end, people were a little alarmed. I spent a lot of time at airport security with that look. I'll just have you know. And there is what I looked like. I didn't wear the robe all the time. But and the sheep was a rental sheep just for the photo, for the cover. But I did have the beard, and I was trying to follow the rules. And it was a challenge because first of all, I had to follow. The Bible says you cannot covet or lie or gossip. And I live in New York City, and I work as a journalist. So that was like 80% of my day. So doing a moral makeover was challenge number one. Challenge number two was that I had to follow some rules that are not, that don't quite jibe with modern American society. So the Bible does say in the Hebrew Scriptures, many times it says that you have to stone adulterers. So I thought, I should at least try. So I'll tell you very quickly, I was able to stone one adulterer. I was in Central Park sort of looking like this, and a man came up to me and said, "What are you doing? Why you look like that?" And I said, "I'm trying to follow all the rules of the Bible, from the Ten Commandments to stoning adulterers." He says, "Well, I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me?" And I said, "Well, that would be great. Thank you. What a nice offer." And I actually... I had been carrying stones around for months, hoping to run into an adulterer, and here he was. So I took him out of my pocket. They were small, pebble sized. I didn't want to get in too much trouble. And I showed him, and he was very aggressive. He grabbed the stones out of my hand and threw them at my face. And I figured, an eye for an eye, I'm going to throw one back at him. So that's how I checked that off my list. At the end of the year, I did shave my beard. I put away my stones. But there was many takeaways from this year. It actually did have a profound impact on my worldview. And I'll just give you a couple that are related to today's theme. Well, first of all, don't take the Bible literally. You know, there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible about loving your neighbor and accepting outcasts. And there's wonderful parts of the Bible. But you don't have to take everything literally. You don't have to believe that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. But the takeaway that's related to today is just how important connections are, how important the community is. In biblical times, there wasn't as much of a sense of the individual as there is today. So sort of the smallest unit of society was your family or your tribe. And the outlook was, instead of individual rights, what are my rights? It was more, what are my responsibilities? What are my responsibilities to my family? What are my responsibilities to the elders? And I am, of course, a fan of individual rights. I think, rights are crucial for our society. But I think we need more of a balance of the responsibility. And I love that perspective that this year brought to me. One of the advisors said, religion is all about belief, belonging, and behavior, the 3 Bs. Belief in God, belonging to a community, and behaving ethically, or behaving in these, doing these rituals that have meaning for some people. And so I never got the first B. I grew up agnostic, so, and even after the year, I remained agnostic. But the other 2 Bs, I really came around to see the importance of it, the belonging to a community. There's lots of evidence that people who belong to communities are so much physically healthier. They're mentally healthier and they're physically healthier. And there's, a lot, I think one of the great problems of our society now is that we're all siloed, and we have some connection through social media, but the face-to-face connection is being lost. And I think that's a big problem. There's studies that show if you belong to a church, your lifespan is longer than those who don't. And it's not because it's a church. It could be anything. It could be a bowling league. It could be anything. It's all about being part of a face-to-face community, having a strong support group. Okay, next book that touched on connection was actually my first book. And this one was inspired by my dad, who is an interesting man. He's super curious, loves to read, and he decided when I was a kid to take on the ultimate reading project. He thought he wanted to learn everything in the world and read the Encyclopedia Britannica, which you guys remember. When I speak to kids, they're like, what are you talking about? Is that the Wikipedia? What are you But I'm glad you guys remember. My dad did not finish. He made it up to the middle of the letter B, around Boomerang, maybe, Borneo. So I thought, I love to read, I love learning, maybe I should finish what he began and restore our family name. So it took me, as Rachel said, it took me over a year. I mean, it is a long book. It's 33,000 words. 33,000 pages, 44 million words. And I read, I read it. I did some skimming, but I read it from A to Z. More precisely, I read it from AAK, A-A-K. That's a type of Korean music from the Middle Ages. And I read it all the way to Z, all the way to Zywiec, Z-Y-W-I-E-C. That's the last word in the encyclopedia. And that is, I don't want to spoil the ending. It's very exciting. So I will let you read the book. It's a town in Poland that makes very good beer, apparently. Now, I've forgotten 99.7% of what I read. But I have learned some big takeaways. I still remember some of those. And one of them is I should mention that it was a challenge, not just for me, but for those around me. My wife started to penalize me $1 for every irrelevant fact I inserted into conversation. So she would say, I have a headache, and I would say, well, did you know that the Bayer Aspirin Company invented heroin? Which is true. 1898, they patented heroin as a cough suppressant. It is apparently a good cough suppressant, but it has some side effects, so I do not recommend it. But so she would say, $1 for that. But I've calmed down. I don't do that anymore. But as I said, these takeaways, and one of the big takeaways was connectivity. And I actually mentioned in the book the 6 degrees of separation experiment. I talk about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and of the butterfly effect, which most of us know about. And it was like when I was reading, the threads between the pages would grow and grow and grow, and I would just have this massive blanket of connections between every part of history, every part of the world. And I'll just give you a couple examples. Randomly, I was looking back over it this morning, and I the letter V. So I'll give you a couple just from the letter V. But you can imagine every letter. But V had, they had a section on volcanoes. And in the volcano section, they mentioned the eruption in 1816 of a volcano in Indonesia that caused, it was one of the biggest weather events ever, and ash all over the world, and it caused what they called the year without summer in England. And there were a bunch of British intelligentsia who went on vacation to Geneva in 1816, and the weather was so cold that they stayed inside and decided they would each tell a horror story, a ghost story or something like that. And one of them was Mary Shelley, and that's where she wrote Frankenstein. And I just love that. I'm reading about volcanoes, and all of a sudden, there's Frankenstein. And it's, as I say, the butterfly effect. I would read in the ventriloquism entry. It talked about how the certain cultures excelled in ventriloquism, including the Inuit and the Zulus. So I love that the cold and the hot, there's a connection through ventriloquism of all things. Vending machines. I would read about vending machines, and we can all thank vending machines for democracy, which I believe we still have. And but vending machines were invented during World War II because people who stayed in the United States were working such long shifts in the factories trying to build weapons that they didn't have time for lunch. So the vending machines helped us. So I just love all the connections that you can see throughout history. All right, third book is the one that was advertised on the flyer. It's all relative. And this one began about 4 years ago. Yeah, about that. And I got a very strange email one day. And the email said, "You don't know me, but I'm your 12th cousin." Now, I thought, as you might, that the next line was going to be, "Please wire $10,000 to my Nigerian bank account." But it turns out he was not asking for money. He was a legitimate family researcher, and he was one of these people who is helping to build the biggest family tree ever. And it's not just, I thought a big family tree, a few hundred. No, it's not a few hundred, not a few thousand. It's millions, tens of millions of people, the global family tree. And the idea is, eventually, in 10, 20 years, maybe we can grow it even beyond. It's right now at about 140 million people, all connected, 15th cousins, 10th cousins, second cousins. And eventually the hope is that we will have one big family tree for all of humanity. And I loved this idea. I just loved the implications that we have all heard. We are all a family. We're all connected. But now, for the first time, because of technology, because of DNA testing, we can actually see it concretely, just how connected we are. And the hope is that with everything related to connection, the hope is that once you realize these connections, that people will act in a more kind manner or a less jerky manner, and we will realize that how connected we are to the globe, we have to treat the environment with more respect. So I thought, okay, this is so interesting, it's going to be the topic of my next book. So the book that resulted was partly a memoir of my own family. So I sort of went deep on my most immediate ancestors. And my grandfather, since he was involved in Nurture Nature, luckily he was a fascinating man, so he provided a wonderful chapter. He, among his many accomplishments, he started a program to bring students from Africa to the United States so that they could study here. And the idea was they might go back to Africa and be leaders in their community there. And one of the people who came over on this program was named Barack Obama Sr. And of course, as you know, he came over and met a woman, and we have Barack Obama Jr. And we have, and my grandfather was alive to see this happen. So once again, this reinforces the theme of connection. Like, who would have thought that him funding an African student would lead to the President of the United States? I just love that. So part of it was about that, but part of it was about this movement to create a world family tree. Not even a tree, of course, it's a forest. And there are two ways that we do this. One is through DNA, and one is through this sort of Wikipedia-like family tree. So it's on the internet, and instead of having your own private tree, you merge your tree with others. So there are thousands, tens of thousands of people all working on the same tree. And it is quite remarkable. If you go on, like the first time you go on this tree, you might be on there already. I was on there without even knowing it. And you will spend, or at least I did, days just Google searching how you're related to everyone in the world. So speaking of Barack Obama, he is my cousin, and he is my aunt's, fifth-grade aunt's husband's father's wife's seventh-grade nephew. So we are practically brothers. And you can do this with everyone. And so part of it was my travels was going around and meeting people and telling them how they were my cousins. So I did some celebrities because I figured people like celebrities, and that could help with book sales. There's Dan Radcliffe and Ricky Gervais and John Legend. And there's the late George H.W. Bush, who I told him that he's pretty closely related to Bill Clinton, interestingly, and he was excited to hear that. And his wife actually loved Bill Clinton. She said, "He is my son from another mother." So anyway, it was a wonderful experience meeting people. It turns out to be a very good strategy. Like, it's like LinkedIn. Like, if you go to someone and say, "I know this sounds weird, but you're my cousin. You're my 13th cousin 3 times removed." A small portion will be like, "Get away from me," like call security. But most people are fascinated. Now the hope, and the other way we are all connected is through this DNA testing. As I'm sure you all know, there are services like 23andMe, and you can spit into a tube, and they will analyze your DNA, and they'll do 2 things with it. One is they will send you back your ancestry, where you're, whether you're from Southern Europe or the Pacific Rim. And the second part is that they will send you hundreds of people who share enough DNA that they are your cousins. And they'll tell you it's their second or fifth or 8th cousin. I remember when I did it, I got the list, and I didn't recognize the names of anyone except for this one person, Julie Jacobs, who is my wife. So it turned out my wife is my 6th cousin. And I actually thought that was pretty cool. My wife was freaked out, and she's like, "No, don't bring that up again." So I'm bringing it up again. Now the hope is that now that this is much more concrete, and will get even more concrete, that this sense of connection will help us live in a better world. Because the farthest cousin you have on Earth is a 70th cousin. So, a rice farmer in Indonesia and they are at most 70th cousins. And there is some evidence that knowing this helps. There was a fascinating study from Harvard about a year ago that said when they showed Israelis and Palestinians, they took two groups, and one group, they showed how they were connected, how they were related genetically, and the other group, they didn't. And the people who were showed how closely they were related treated each other with more kindness, with more, and were more open to negotiation. And I have seen this in my own life. It's not on quite as profound a level, but I call it, for me, I call it the Judge Judy effect, because I had always found Judge Judy, the TV, like the highest paid TV person in the world. I always found her incredibly obnoxious and abrasive. Yeah, you too. All right, I'm not alone. So, but then I figured out she's like my sixth cousin, twice removed, and it changed my perspective. I was like, you know what? She's not so bad. That's just cousin Judy doing her shtick. She's probably a sweetheart underneath. And when someone cuts me off on the highway, I try to think, you know what? We shared probably an 8th great grandparent. So maybe I should give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think it won't solve all our world problems, but it will break down tribalism. It will hopefully make us realize it's not about us versus them, it's all us. And we've got to band together and stop crises like the climate change crisis, which Kate talked about. Now, just because I like to present all sides, there is a chance that this will backfire and that DNA testing, for instance, will have the opposite effect and will increase tribalism. And there are a couple of disturbing examples of this. There are some white supremacists online who have taken the DNA tests, and they have they have contests to see who is most pure, quote unquote pure, and a lot of them are actually very upset because most of us are not pure. Most of us are a mix. You know, I'm actually more Jewish than most people. I'm about 97.5% Ashkenazi Jew, according to, I took all the tests, so this is just an average, and 2.5% Egyptian Arab. So, which I like that I have the Middle East conflict in my body. So I'm trying to work myself out. But a lot of these white supremacists, they find out that they're a mix, and sometimes they'll have two different reactions. One is denial and anger, and say, you know, this is wrong. They accuse 23andMe of being a multicultural conspiracy. But there are occasions where it jolts them into realizing, you know, this is maybe not a good worldview, that I am, you know, if I'm part African American or part Jewish, maybe I should open my mind. And by the way, at the end of this project, I wanted to make it as concrete as possible. So I thought, you know, now that I have millions of cousins, maybe I should throw the biggest family reunion ever. So that's the end of the book, is sort of, that's the climax, is I throw what I called the global family reunion. And I invited all 7 billion of my cousins. We did not get 100% turnout. You guys were invited, by the way. But we got about 10,000 people worldwide. We had 4,000 in New York, and then we had 40 all around the world. And there's a shot from it. Oh yeah, we had rabbis and a minister and an imam, so it was like a joke. It was like walk into a bar, walk into a family reunion. We had Sister Sledge came and sang "We Are Family," and changed it to all my cousins and me, which was very nice. Now I will, again, I like to be transparent, so I will say the idea of Sister Sledge's song "We Are Family" is like the ultimate anthem to unity. Unfortunately, we did not get all 4 of the Sister Sledge. We got 3 of them, 75%, because they don't like one of the other sisters. There's like a lawsuit. So that's family, you know. You take the good and the bad. But it was a fascinating. I was super stressed the whole time because I was worried about what's going to go wrong. You know, we had a drone taking video, and is it going to fall on someone's head, and I'll be sued. But luckily, all went smoothly, and people seemed to have a good time. The final book I want to talk to you about, and I'm happy to answer any questions right after this one. And I'll also be signing here or wherever you want. The final one is called Thanks 1,000. That just came out 2 weeks ago. And this started because I had been reading all this research, all the scientific research on the benefits of gratitude. And there really is a mountain of it, that it's good for your mental health, for fighting off depression, for helping to recover more quickly from diseases. And so I decided to institute a gratitude ritual in our house. So a couple of years ago, I decided we would say a prayer of thanksgiving. But as I said earlier, I'm not very religious in believing in God way. So I said, why don't we thank the people who helped make this food possible? So I would say before a meal, I'd say, I'd like to thank the tomato farmer who farmed these tomatoes, and the woman at the grocery who ran the cashier for selling me these tomatoes. And my son, who was 10 at the time, said, Dad, that's it's kind of lame because those people aren't here. They can't hear us. If you really cared, you would go and thank them in person. And I thought, that is a very interesting idea. That's a book idea. So I thank him for earning his supper. And that set me off on a several-month journey around the world where I tried to thank every single person who had a role, no matter how small that role, in making my morning cup of coffee. And I took it sort of the 6 degrees of connection that Kate talked about. So I would thank, of course, the farmers. I went to Colombia, South America, to thank the farmers. But I also wanted to thank the truck driver who drove the coffee beans. And he couldn't have done his job without the road. So I thank the people who paved the road. And what about the guy who painted the yellow lines on the road so that the truck didn't veer into traffic? Or what about the person who created the little cardboard sleeve for your coffee cup, which, by the way, important fact, is called a zarf. That is the official name for the car, Z-A-R-F. And there were ancient zarfs made of gold and tortoiseshell, but the cardboard zarf was invented in 1991. And I talked to the man who created it, and I just love that every little part of our lives requires thousands of people in dozens of countries to make it happen. So I would go and I would call them up or thank them in person or write them emails. And I will say that the reactions were mixed. Some people were confused. They were like, is this a pyramid scheme? What are you trying to sell me? But the vast majority were really grateful. I remember I called the woman who does pest control for the warehouse where my coffee is stored, and I said, I know this sounds strange, but I want to thank you for keeping the insects out of my coffee. And she said, well, that is strange, but thank you for calling. We don't get a lot of positive feedback here. So, and that, she said, you just made my day, which in turn made my day, because that's the beauty of thanking, is it should be good for both the thanker and the thankee. Again, one of the big themes, of course, was connection and how everything in our lives, and Kate just did a great job of showing that like our clothes are made all around the world. And one important aspect of this, I think, dovetails perfectly with what Rachel was saying, because gratitude should not make us complacent. Gratitude should, and when it's at its best, I think, it should inspire us to action and inspire us to change the world for the better. And I saw this a little bit in my own journey. For instance, water. Coffee is 98.8% water. So I had to thank the people who provided water to New York City. And I went up to the Catskills, and it was fascinating to meet some of the hundreds of people who work on the giant reservoirs, and just the incredible amount of work that goes into it, from scientists to even down to the rangers who go around and pick up the deer poop and cow poop around the reservoir so it doesn't rain. So I tell my kids, like, appreciate your water. This did not just arrive. It is miraculous that we can turn the faucet and get clean, drinkable water. And what I think it drove home to me is this is unusual. This is, throughout 99.9% of human history, we did not have this. And even in the world today, there are billions of people who don't have this, that spend much of their day walking to wells to try to get clean water. So it inspired me to look into what are the best water charities and try to get involved. My personal plug is for Dispensers for Safe Water. It's very evidence-based. That's what I like. And since we're at a science center, I want to give them a plug. When I went to the other thing about that is, realizing when I realized what goes into making a cup and just the astounding amount of energy, I did what Kate told me to do, and I do try to drink my coffee out of a water bottle. So just so you know, I get a thumbs up. Thank you. So when it works best, the studies show that gratitude should make you more aware of where your everything in your life comes from, more aware of the chain, and more pro-social, more open to trying to make it better and better for the environment. I've been talking about this for the last 2 weeks, and I've loved it. I actually last night at 11 o'clock got the weirdest piece of publicity I've gotten for this book, which is that Chuck Norris, the action star, has a column on World Net Daily, which is an extreme right-wing website, and he wrote about my book. And so I am thankful to Chuck Norris, even though we don't share politics. And I've encouraged friends and family and colleagues to go on these gratitude trails of their own. And it doesn't have to be coffee. It could be anything, because, there's your socks, your T-shirt, everything requires thousands of people. And you don't have to go around the world. It could be a small gesture. It could be just looking someone in the eye instead of, what I sometimes do, which is just treat people like a vending machine, and I look at my phone and hand them my credit card. Just a simple, small thing like that. Sending a note to the designer of a logo you love, or going on Facebook and putting it on the company's website. I mean, designers, a good logo, they're all over it. They are our landscape. And so I've become to appreciate the importance of a good logo. These are the things that fill our visual field. So I wanted to thank you. That was my final thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you to Rachel. Thank you to the folks who made the fabric for the chairs you're sitting on. Thank you to the person who went into a mine, probably in Chile, to get the copper for the microphone that is inside, for the wires that are inside this microphone. And thank you for the wonderful, it was a lovely event.